I say this all the time, and it's true. The New York State Homes and Community Renewal, the state agency here in New York responsible for housing, is our most important partner, and it's really not even close. We've often, been involved with different things, and certainly our real estate development right now. Silver Gardens is almost, it looks like it's almost done in Highland. Our partner Richard Durantine is here, so we're excited about that. We're getting ready to start construction on the Quality Inn, but we have probably about $100 million in projects in construction or in the pipeline. But remarkably now, we also have about $40 million in programs that the state has seen fit to roll out in accessory dwelling units. We have about $15 million of grant money for 3 counties. Flood mitigation services. We're doing rental repairs for landlords. We're doing homeowner repairs. We have a $5 million THIP program for the homeowners in the city of Newburgh alone. We're doing home buying assistance. We're doing senior housing repairs. Of course, we also work with HCR on our Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program. We exist, and it's a great partnership. They represent state government. We're a local nonprofit with capacity and a mission to deliver housing services. We're the keeper of housing chips, and it's very important that we deliver them. So we're delighted today to have Commissioner Visnauskas here. I think RuthAnne became Commissioner of HCR in 2017. She received her bachelor degree in urban studies from the University of Pennsylvania and holds a master's degree in urban planning from the Robert Wagner School of Public Service at NYU. In addition to being an outstanding leader at HCR, RuthAnne has been a trusted and very accessible colleague in this work. Accessible to me, accessible to RUPCO, and in particular, she has been an ally of the nonprofit sector. Last summer, the New York Alliance of NeighborWorks organizations hosted RuthAnne and Dina Levy at Landmark Place here in Kingston. And tomorrow, a number of nonprofits from around the state, NeighborWorks organizations, will meet with RuthAnne and her staff in Troy, New York. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the podium the Commissioner of Homes and Community Renewal, RuthAnne Visnauskas.
Good afternoon. I'm delighted to be here. Do you need me? Who's Maru? Sorry, you're raising your hand. Should I stop? Okay. I hope everybody isn't in like a full stomach lull, but if you're not off, no offense. It's okay. I guess it was really a delicious lunch. Thank you, Kevin, for that lovely introduction. It's delightful to be up here. I was saying to a couple of folks that it's a huge job perk to actually be able to drive around the state in this time of year. You all who live up here and see the trees all the time. I don't have a lot of trees on my street in New York City, so it's like a very visual immersion process to drive up here and force myself from not checking my email. But it's lovely to be up here, and I'm actually going to be up here for the next couple of days, which is great. I won't acknowledge all the electeds that Kevin did so well, but I always love seeing the county executive because it is not everywhere I go that I feel like I'm sometimes copying off of what other local elected officials in New York State are doing. And the Jen Metzger, between the Housing Action Plan, the Housing Action Plan Fund, it's just like the hits keep coming up here, and we are really grateful and thankful. We know at the state that we rely on both local partners like RUPCO, but also municipalities who know better what you need, what your needs are up here, what your assets are, what people are struggling with. And so it is great to have that sort of wealth of knowledge pointed towards a solution on housing affordability and the county executive. So thank you for that. I think Mayor Noble left, but I often feel like he is in a competitive race to be the first mayor to do every law we pass at the state level around affordable housing or tenant protections. And sometimes if he does them before we even pass the law, but that's okay. Huge shout out to the city of Kingston, who has been doing incredible work under Mayor Noble's leadership. Yes, I agree. So I'm proud to be here today, both in representation of the governor and all the work that she does on housing, and also to talk about what an incredible partner RUPCO is, and I'll sort of weave in and out of that in my sort of short remarks. But I hope people feel the energy and excitement from Governor Hochul around housing. She is very committed to the issue. We have been year over year, coming back to in the budget process and in the legislative process to talk about new tools that we need to tackle the housing issues and the affordability issues around the state. This past year, we passed a series of tenant protections. We provided more capital, which I'll talk about in a second, to different programs. And we also strengthened this program we have called Pro-Housing Communities. So we want localities around the state to build more housing. You all, doing this work sort of know, in some places that's a little easier, and in some places it's nearly impossible to do. And we understand that engaging with localities to be part of the solution to housing is how we're going to get there. And we came up last year with a real carrot approach to provide $650 million to localities who are pro-housing. And we're delighted to sort of get that through the process without much pushback, and I'll talk a little more about that. But we really understand that resources, whether it's to localities or to nonprofits and other development partners, are what make a difference in terms of getting housing built and in terms of relieving the stress that families feel around housing affordability. On the sort of housing budget last year, we put in $500 million through the budget process to support the development of state sites. So the governor really wants to put kind of her land where her mouth is, for lack of a better phrase, and to say that where there are state-owned assets in communities around the state where we can turn them into housing, and particularly affordable housing, we very much want to do that. And a lot of sites need infrastructure, parking replacement, water and sewer, demolition of existing buildings. And so there is $500 million sitting in the budget to be spent to facilitate the development of up to 15,000 units of housing. Perhaps that will grow over time on state-owned sites. We're really excited about that commitment. We also saw new money for public housing authorities, for land banks, funding to upgrade vacant rental apartments, funding for USDA 515 projects, certainly a sort of stock of housing that is very much in need of investment and very much housing very vulnerable and low-income New Yorkers. So excited for the first time to have funding specifically for 515. And we have these resources available, and we really want to promote supply. And if you have heard me talk at all in the last year or two, supply is a keen focus of our work sort of statewide from a policy perspective. And here in the Hudson Valley, the situation mirrors the constraints in other parts of the state. But as you all know, the beauty of this area, combined with the proximity to New York City and the effects of COVID, really increased housing pressures even more, as the ability of people from downstate to relocate up here and their ability to pay more for properties made it harder for people who were already here to stay where they are or to find new housing opportunities. There have been studies upon studies upon studies, but there were two notable ones that we were looking at in the last couple weeks that talk about how many households are currently living with economic stress, and some of the data was showing that about 44% of New York households, across sort of all sizes of households, are living in economic stress. Patterns for Progress, who does incredible work up here, and shout out to them for their partnership as well, shows that the result for families and individuals adds up to financial uncertainty and a lot of disruption in the face of lost income. Layer this over what we already have in sort of systemic racism and racial bias and economic discrimination, and we can all sort of see that play out in our lives every day and the stress that it causes New Yorkers. So I say these things not to be depressing, but to talk about sort of how important the work is, to highlight the issues, and to make sure that we have the resources we need and the tools we need to create stability and improve lives for all New Yorkers. I, like all of you, are sort of focused on that on my day-to-day to make the state more affordable, to make it more livable. Upstate here is not unlike other places. You have rents that are 40 to 60% above where they were 10 years ago. Home prices up 50 or in some places 80% higher than they were 10 years ago. And I've said this a lot of times, but it bears repeating. We have this real mismatch in job growth and housing production. We have created about 1 million jobs over the last 10 years and 400,000 units of housing. And we think as we look forward over the next 10 years, we need to about double our production. When I think about doubling our production, I'm sure for Kevin, if you thought about doubling your production, it is not easy. It is a lot. We do a lot of work, and to think about doubling down on that is a big challenge. But I do think we're sort of poised to start to get there. We have a housing plan that we're now in our second 5-year housing plan. We have 100,000 units supported by $4 billion of capital and about $25 billion of overall investment. We're on track to achieve that, or at about 45,000 units towards the 100,000, and we're about halfway through, so we feel very much on track. And we can't do all that work without people in this room. RUPCO is a very real and a very effective piece of service delivery for us at the state level. As Kevin said, there's been a good size uptick, which I'd love to hear about, in the dollars and sort of the programs that RUPCO is running here. So I sometimes think we're going to run out of acronyms, so I won't say them all here. But programs to fight foreclosure, administering Section 8 vouchers, running affordable housing development programs, down payment assistance, accessory dwelling units, home repairs, foreclosure prevention, flood mitigation, historic, the list of hits, sort of goes on, and the reach and the impact is extraordinary. It is not everywhere in the state that we have partners like RUPCO who, when if something happens and we come to them and say, hey, there's this issue and we have some resources, do you think you could run a program that sort of before we can finish the question, Kevin is like, yes. And that's not everywhere, and it is so important for us, and we are so appreciative of the work and of the sort of say yes-iveness to being able to run new programs. In 2023, RUPCO assisted over 40 households to purchase their first homes, financed 54 home rehabs, helped over 64 households with emergency repairs, counseled over 350 homeowners around foreclosure prevention, helped 14 low and moderate income homeowners construct an ADU, something we are somewhat new in the state, and we are really excited to see take off as a real source of affordable housing that can happen everywhere. I would congratulate also the Greenberger Center for Social and Criminal Justice with the City of Hudson and Columbia County will welcome the Wellness Hub, another sort of incredible effort to make a concerted effort around social and criminal justice reform that ties into the housing challenges we see everywhere. So to the Greenberger Center, I'm certainly proud to be able to sort of share the spotlight at this event with you, and thank you for that. So there's no doubt that we need innovative solutions and that we need to generate hundreds of thousands of additional homes over the next decade if we want to address the housing needs in every community for people of all backgrounds and in all stages and phases of life. Everybody needs to be in a home that they can afford, full stop. And all communities and all levels of governments have to be part of that solution. We still need legislative changes, I think, that will allow for the kind of production that we need and the scale that we need to meet the demand, but it's our mission, and we want that to very much be the legacy of this administration, that when young people are looking to buy a first home, they can find one. That when families need a little more room because they're growing, they can find a home. When older New Yorkers who want to stay in the communities they've lived in, but they want to downsize, get out of their home from the 1800s, or just be in a smaller apartment, that they have an opportunity to do that. For RUPCO, I think these opportunities are embedded in developments like East End 2, like Silver Gardens, like the redevelopment of the Quality Inn. I would digress for a second and say that when Kevin first brought I Love the East End project, and when it first came into the agency, someone on my team was like, this is like scattered site rehab, and it's also like some scattered site new construction, and there's like a big building, I'm not really sure what's going on in that, and I was like, that sounds great. They were like, sounds really messy. I was like, that's the best stuff. And that is true for the Quality Inn, right? There are not a lot of upstate organizations taking on the challenge of what do we do with some of our underutilized motels and turning those into opportunities for housing, especially for very vulnerable populations. So these developments and so many more, and really everything that we invest in and work on with partners like RUPCO, do more than provide a roof overhead. They increase the supply of quality and sustainable homes, they revitalize neighborhoods, they strengthen communities. I would talk for a minute about sort of sustainability. Specifically, we are really committed to reducing our carbon footprint in housing. We're operating under this big goal at the state level to reduce our carbon footprint 80% by 2050, which is sort of like a what does that mean kind of goal. What it means is that housing is the biggest sort of carbon footprint we have in the state, and unless we start switching buildings onto electric and off of fossil fuels, we will never reduce our greenhouse gas effects that we have here. And so we have been trying to push the envelope on all of our new constructions now electric. We are turned now to rehabs and are going to be focusing on rehabs and getting them to be off fossil fuels and onto electric. And we're doing a lot of this with federal dollars, and I think in this moment, as we go into, I forget how many stressful days there are between now and the election, but as we go into this election, to me, I think it's important to think about, when we get the funding from the Inflation Reduction Act, there was an enormous amount of funding that came through the federal government, that we rely on the federal government and resources to do things like create the change that we need in our housing stock in terms of sustainability and in terms of electrification. They are really not things we can do on our own. The federal inflation, the IRA funds, which are going to be available in 2025, will include rebates for home efficiency and for electrification, and it created this thing called the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, the GGRF. It's another acronym. It's $7 billion nationally for clean energy and climate projects. At HCR specifically, we have about $250 million that we applied through NYSERDA with to deploy in solar projects across the state. So it's the impact of the housing, and you all know this, it's the building, it's what goes on inside, but it's also sort of our bigger impact on the planet, and we're really excited to be getting those federal resources out into communities early next year as quickly as we can. I would just do a quick sort of shout out on the pro-housing communities that I talked about before. We want to create a coalition of willing communities around the state that want to grow their housing supply. We know not everywhere can, because there's a demand in every corner of the state for housing, but for places where there is, we want to provide municipalities with resources, because that's what localities want, whether it's for planning, for infrastructure, for technology, so that they can create plans for how to grow and where to grow. People, I'm sure, are familiar with programs like the Downtown Revitalization Initiative and New York Forward, and we are really now tethering those, as I said before, it's about $650 million, and I suspect going into this budget season that may grow, of discretionary state dollars that could go to localities who are pro-housing communities. Up here, we're really excited that we have statewide, we're excited that we have about 400 communities that have started the process with us, and we've certified over 200 communities around the state as pro-housing. That includes Kingston, Hudson, Beacon, Newburgh, Poughkeepsie, and a host of other towns and villages throughout the Hudson Valley, or that are either certified already or on their way to being certified, including both the town and the village of New Paltz. And we see that as a strong signal that communities really are engaged in this topic, and they really do see growth as about their own economic success and about helping their residents stay and live affordably in communities that they've been in for a long time. So in closing, I would just really come back to a giant thank you to all of you. We cannot do any of the work we do at the state without organizations like RUPCO, and RUPCO can't do any work without its board and all its staff that make it be the incredible organization that it is. We can't do it without really strong elected leadership. It is hard to build housing. Not everybody wants change, and new housing can be change for a lot of people, and it takes a lot of leadership to make those decisions, and even if you're doing it and what people understand is in their best interest, it is hard. And so we are really thankful for the political leadership, for local leadership, for your advocacy, for your partnership, for your dedication, and really for your commitment to making New York State a more affordable place to live. Thank you so much, everyone.
So I forgot to inform you about the Q&A, so I have a couple questions. And maybe I can just use this mic. RuthAnne, J.D. Lorenzo is here from New York Preservation League, and they're going to honor our work, a couple of weeks that we did in Newburgh in historic. Can you talk a little bit about how housing and HCR has worked with historic tax credits and some of our affordable housing throughout the state?
Yes, I would say that we are very lucky in New York State that between the brownfield tax credit, the federal housing tax credit, the state affordable housing credits. We have our own low-income housing tax credit that's just for New York State taxpayers. And for the historic tax credit that is run out of parks at the state level. While it sounds like too many programs and a lot more acronyms, what it actually is an incredible suite of resources that allow us to clean up dirty sites, preserve existing historic buildings, let those buildings be occupied by low and moderate income households and be back sort of in the jewels of the communities that they always were. So we've been incredibly fortunate. I think the number of events that I go to that Parks is there also, right beside us, is, I don't know, probably 50% or more of the projects. While we love our new construction projects at HCR, we also love communities that have properties that can be listed on the register and be eligible for those. So certainly they're a great part of the work we do.
Are there any particular policies or programs that you think might help the state to scale up a little bit in terms of affordable housing? Anything come to mind?
Well, so I would say one thing, well, I would say probably lots of things, but I would say that we at the state level receive about $2 billion a year in tax-exempt bonds that we get from the feds that we finance about 40 or so projects a year with. It would be super great if that could be $4 billion, not 2, and we could double our production. We get about $45 million of 9% tax credits. A lot of 9% is coming up on the screen there, I saw it today. And we do also about 40 projects a year with that. Wouldn't it be cool if we could have $90 million a year of tax credits and double that? And my last one would be, I don't know this number that well, but if I knew this number, I would say it. If whatever the number of Section 8 vouchers that are in New York State at the moment, if we could double the number of vouchers that are available to households in New York State, and we could do all 3 of those things, so sort of production at the large scale, production at smaller scale, and vouchers for people for like, I don't know, like a 4-year time period or something like that. And I think that the pressures that people feel would be a lot less over a 4-year time period, and that would make a huge difference in our sort of affordability of the state as a whole. That's my dream, my federal dream.
No, that's great. I have to join you. The voucher program, often much maligned, Section 8, but it's an economical method to help people to afford the current market housing, and to get more vouchers, that would be spectacular. So last question. I have a homeowner here, I think, who might be on our wait list for homeowner repair. How does the state, given the huge continuum of housing and the number of programs, how do you guys sort of prioritize what kinds of programs you're going to fund?
I would say that we have tried to expand the suite of programs we have to meet the needs that people have. I think we had a sort of a long history in 9% tax credit production in the state, and we actually weren't doing as much with R4s in upstate and in sort of kind of mid-sized projects generally. And we changed that, and now we're doing those projects all over. I would say we had some home repair programs, but in some cases we've doubled or tripled the funding for those because they work and we have demand for them. As things like floods or policy issues like ADUs, we've sort of been able to go back time and time again and secure more resources and go to our partners and ask them to then run those programs. So I don't know that we see ourselves as sort of limited or having to make choices as much as making sure that where we see more demand in our existing home repair programs or other types of programs, that we are going back and asking both the governor and the legislature to increase the funding for programs that work and that are really getting real money out into communities and shoring up existing housing and making sure people can stay in houses that they've been in for a long time. So I think that's what I would say.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Special request from Mr. Doyle. Has certain privileges. Data shows the greatest need is for 50% AMI and below, not 60 to 80% AMI. What are we doing to address this reality?
I think I would say the need is great across, what used to be needs at the very low income is now, as AMIs have gotten up, I think we see that economic stress across the spectrum. For our part, I think a lot of our programs are focused on that lower sort of 50% of AMI and below. we try not to have like that cliff, right, where 50 AMI is, you know, whatever dollar amount it is, and someone who makes $3,000 more is totally shut out of access to things. So I think for us, we try, when income averaging came into place, that allowed projects not to cliff at 60 AMI, but you could go to 80 AMI as long as you went to 40 AMI, kind of an equal measure, that gave us an opportunity to really have breadth in the incomes that we serve. So I think we will continue to be funding, certainly at the lowest income. I was thinking, actually, when you were making when I made the Section 8 comment, you know, I think the stat is that 25% of households that are eligible for a Section 8 voucher actually get one. So there is an enormous number of low-income families, you know, who need them. And certainly, I think, you know, we will continue to advocate at the federal level for large chunks of resources like that do things we can't really do at the state level.
But you did enable us at Woodstock Commons. We underwrote 10 units of senior housing for folks, seniors at 30% AMI, with our partnership with you. And our Section 8 vouchers, you know, all of them serve 50% and below, and actually 3/4 must serve 30% and below. And then when we were able to develop a place like Landmark and bring in Empire State supported housing, we're bringing in homeless seniors perhaps at zero income. So there's a number of programs that get there, and the continuum is, as you know, now it's also reaching up above 80% too, which particularly in terms of home ownership. People can't afford to buy homes, so tremendous need, and as much as we're doing, there's more to do. But I want to thank you again, and really great. Thanks, Ruth.